Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, and today's topic will be a continuation of yesterday's theme and subject matter, which is sketching mountains, and it'll be from imagination. And so this is where I ended up with the mountain sketch I did yesterday from imagination, and I will put up a before picture from yesterday over here, and so you can see. But yeah, check out yesterday's video if you want to see more of how I did it. But welcome back if you are returning, and welcome if you're new to the channel. I sketch and post every day, and I use 5-minute timers to stay focused and build a sketching habit. So I'll start a 5-minute timer right now. And see, I'll put up a before, and then this is where I ended up, and I'll just kind of explain what's going on. So you'll notice that, again, just check out yesterday's video if you want to know more details about like what all of this is. But yeah, I created a value scale yesterday, and so you'll notice that yesterday, this one, the darkest one of the values here, was I wasn't really using it, but then I did, obviously. And so I'll kind of talk about the scale here. So on the light side, it's called a high key, just to, like, that's the technical term, but you don't really have to remember that. But the idea is that if the darkest value in the picture kind of stopped right here, and then you just divide this up, meaning like this is the darkest, and then all the way to like the white of the paper, or whatever medium you're using, or whatever you use for the highlight, then it would be called a high key, and it would look probably more daytime. And then if you went this way, which is kind of what I did, and I'll kind of talk about that, it'll look more like nighttime, or like, kind of like a thunderstorm approaching. So part of that is because I do tend to overwork just because I use a pen, and so if I go too dark on something, I have to balance out the values. And so if like this area gets that dark, I have to bring everything else along with it. Although you'll notice that like this isn't as dark, and there's a lot to that I won't be able to cover in this video, but that's why it looks like that, basically. Then there's also the thing of style. I mean, I'm working on a dark fantasy book series, which is going to have artwork and illustrations and comics and stuff. And it's this long-term project, and this is like part of the, like, just like the concept art, if you will, or the illustrations and stuff. So there's that, and then also my own preference. And part of why sometimes I push a picture that and then it ends up being kind of overworked is because it's just a challenge, and sometimes cool things come out of it. So I like it. I feel like it's a little overworked, but not really. I think if I had to go in and like add highlights, it might be kind of overworked, but I'm okay with it for my sketchbook, and it gives me an idea. And so yeah, so that's to start off with. And then the next thing we'll do for today is, so I mentioned that it's from imagination, and that's kind of important for what I'm doing, like, and what I'm talking about. So I want to keep this part kind of in the camera here. Okay. So I created some thumbnails, and these were all from imagination, and I have a lot of videos where I'm doing studies, so I would recommend doing studies and then doing stuff from imagination, and it just depends on where you're at in your like art journey. For me right now, it's the main thing is to be able to generate these things from imagination. And so I like to do thumbnails because it's quick and you don't get and the ideas, it's like brainstorming. So there's some that don't really work, and then there's some that do work. And I'll just use these thumbnails as kind of a way to, so first of all, there's a lot of like really cool little ideas, and I like that. But I'm gonna, so that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. So I'm gonna zoom in and kind of talk about like the value scale. So for example, if you were to take this one and divide it into 3, so we'll take like this half right here. So the way it would work is that, let's say you do, and it depends, we're using pen and ink, so that's why we're going to crosshatch. But if you go like that and then do it again, the easiest way to get like this to look darker is to crosshatch. So go this way. So if that were like, so just taking that into account, so this would be the scale right there. So you could approach it different ways. You could decide that the foreground will be like that. You could decide that you're going to go in here, and then in the middle ground you're going to do the same thing. And then go this way, and you would create your value scale right there. And then to kind of, so that would be like, the first pass was the drawing, the sketch, and then I shaded it based upon this plan right there. And then to do like the third pass, you might decide to start to add a little bit more definition to like this foreground. So notice how, but still kind of maintaining that. And like you would use the little like smaller shapes to sort of create the detail, and then that's gonna be the focal point, and that's gonna look like it's going into the distance. And then you can blend them some. I mean, again, it depends on the medium you're using. If you're using pen, you're gonna have to use these little lines to do that, and sometimes you can go over in the same direction without cross-hatching, because not only does that change the value, but it changes the texture. So it'll look more detailed, it'll look more rough right here. So that's one way to think about it. You could go the other way. You could decide that the background will be like this, still using the same scale, and then just kind of do that. And then for the further back, you could just do the cross hatching there. And if you do it this way, it'll look like there's more light. I mean, it could still be like nighttime, but it would that some of that depends on like if it's just black and white like this, you may not be able to tell if it's nighttime or daytime. If you really wanted it to look daytime, you could actually, again, they call it high key, but like make it brighter. So you could take this scale and basically do it kind of like that. And again, I'm using this as like a thumbnail, so I'm being like pretty like spare with the cross hatching. So what that means is that you may just outline it. That's kind of what that does. It basically means I'm going to pick like one side of it to have, let's go with this side. So I'm just going to pick one side to kind of have like a little bit of the shadow and just leave it at that. And just use that as the, so that'll look brighter. So hopefully you can see the difference. Some of it's going to be like, this could be daytime, but like it has shadows, which is natural. This one is like a lot of light is kind of in the picture. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. If you take this one and there's more to it, but this is the basics of it. So let's say you just make that like dark, make that black, and then cross hatch this and then do this. So now you're saying that that's the darkest and the brightest. I'll just use this one right here. So to begin with, if you're saying that that's the brightest, you might just go ahead and put down some tone. And I mean, if you're using a marker, you could do that. If you're using paint, like whatever, I'm using pen. So by doing this, you're saying that that's the brightest that it will get. And then same concept here. You kind of just have to figure out, and that's part of composition and style. You just have to figure out like where you want the focal point to be. So if you do like a thick line like this, that's also like that dark value that counts as the like the darkest. So if you don't do that for the rest of it, that'll look closer or more in focus or something. So that's one way to do it, and still keep that, maintain like that, what is this called? The scale. Then for the cross hatching, you could decide to do this, and then you'll get your like the middle, like the mid-tone, I suppose is the correct term there. So hopefully that makes some sense. And then you can just use like the really dark parts to compose the picture, like add detail, that kind of thing, and then just leave that and it'll look like it's in the background. So that's just kind of an explanation. I mean, I explained a lot of it, but that kind of gave you more detail. And of course, just practice and you can see the result. So with that in mind, so that's a way of doing thumbnails. Zoom out here. And also how to incorporate like a value study. And by doing that, it'll really help out. I mean, it'll save you So for this part, I wanted to talk about, again, this is all from imagination, but like let's say you wanted to kind of do different perspectives. And so I would suggest, first of all, using a pencil. So there's different approaches, and I'll ink these. But basically, it's, again, if you want to check out yesterday's video on how I did this, it's the same thing, but you're going to kind of think about like the perspective. So with this one, so it's kind of the same, like whereas like in the first sketch it was sort of like flat, but here we're gonna make the lines, so it'd be good to use a pencil because a lot of it is gonna be the shapes and like the overlap. So yeah, I used a pencil to begin with, and then we're just going to kind of outline it to begin with. So it's good to use a pencil because a lot of the perspective for this kind of thing is going to come from the like this thing, like the overlap. So it's like that kind of thing. And now for this sketch, I did use like a fine point, so this is a medium point. And then, so that's 5 minutes, so start another one. So for a lot of it, I did use this, and if you kind of have to experiment with it. If you want to be simple, you could just use this. And I would point out that from the sketch from yesterday, I actually liked it. That's just, and I mean, I have a picture of it, so that's good. But if I really wanted to draw like the same mountains, or you could just like redraw it, it's not that hard. But the point is that like there can be different versions. I mean, this could be like this particular instance of like these mountains. So so for this one, but yeah, I was gonna say that I have a lot of videos where I've shown like a demo of how to do it. I mean, I don't do it too much. I mean, I've done it plenty, and I tend to show how I do this, but like it's just a style. It's not something to like you just kind of, it's your preference. It's not for everybody, I guess is what I'm getting at. But yeah, if you want to use like a different pen, if you'll notice, like that also affects things. And so you'll have, now you're like kind of in the mountains here. Like you're standing on one of the peaks. So that's one way to do that. And then yeah, just figure out like the values that we were talking about. As far as like just specifically, so if you want to use like a fine point, now you can get a lot more fine details, obviously. It's a little more work, I would think, but you can get more details. But basically the way it works is like, let's say you decide that you're going to do this much, so you shaded it this much. Depending on, if you already know you're going to make kind of, like I didn't really know how I was going to ink it, honestly. I was just playing around. But if you already know that it's going to be pretty dark, you could go ahead and just darken it in, and you can use a brush pen or whatever tool that you want. So this is you're figuring out where the dark and the light of the picture is. You can just go ahead and do this. So if you know that you're already gonna be more towards like this part, you could decide to do it that way. And then maybe for this the lighter side, you might decide to go in another direction. So part of like the way that I do pen and ink is I realize that some areas are going to be sort of the happy accident areas, and then to come like to blend like the dark there. So some areas I want to leave like this, and I'm just going to say that this is going to be the brightest area. But if I crosshatch, just go this way, it'll start to blend the values, and then you would just keep doing that, and then you would figure out like smaller shapes. So mountains tend to have like smaller facets, like smaller shapes. Sometimes the shapes will go this way. So there's like a pattern to them. But if they're on the light, you want to keep that in mind too, because there's reflected light. And so for reflected light, that's where like the gradations come in, like this kind of thing. Meaning there's light also bouncing off of the other things in the picture. And this is just one style of mountain. So some mountains, for example, so I talked about global value. This is kind of like the global value. But what if like the rock is like a dark kind of rock? So you would have to, so this is the local value of the rock itself, but still maintaining the, so that's 5 minutes. I'll start to wrap this up. I'll start another 5-minute timer. So what that means is that it's in the back. This could be snow, but it would still, the snow still wouldn't be as bright as if there's snow over here. But like sometimes it would be, because again, I mean, it's an environment. But even if you could see the highlights on the snow, the shape, the scale of it also affects like the picture. And so from going from like a kind of like a beginner, like you should understand this. This is what it means to understand like the basics of drawing. Like if you're struggling with this, to understand like the value, understanding how to draw, like and understanding like composition, then I mean that's like the basic drawing. And this is true of if you're drawing a person or mountains or whatever. So this is where your understanding comes from. And to begin with, you might need to use reference. If you do it enough, then you can kind of come up with your own style and your own ideas. To the intermediate part is where you start adding more like of the shading of like the more subtle kind of ideas here that I'm showing you. And then for like to really, this is kind of like advanced, where you have a vision and you have a style and you have maybe a story that you're creating. I don't know, but like this is what I kind of want to express. But this is sort of the technical aspect of it. And it's nice to look at in and of itself. So I'm going to just do that much. I'll let you see this part. It's the same thing. It's from imagination. And but yeah, it's good to use a pencil because sometimes you want to put in like this. It's because it's really like that overlapping of the shapes that create. And also with a pencil, you can work out the values a little bit better, because if you're just doing this with ink, like I have to keep that way. And then if it throws off the values, then I have to keep adding ink. Yeah, and just play around with like the patterns you could have from like dark to kind of light. You could have it be darker at the top here, and because a lot of times in mountains there's mist and light and stuff that's coming from like the foot. And then with these concepts in mind, then sketch from photos or from life, and just see how that can help you to draw from imagination or just get better at drawing. Because I've mentioned before that if your drawing is strong, you don't have to do a whole lot. I mean, like, it could be a sketch and it'll still look nice. And then if you can put down some ink and you'll just get better. Or you can paint it, and we'll do more of that too. But yeah, before I sign off for today, I want to thank you for joining me for the daily sketching routine. And if you like these videos, please support the channel. I appreciate it. And until next time, keep on sketching.